The drums were drumming, the band was playing, and the whole army was singing their favourite song. You know, that one about the little old lady who hammered a tent peg through the ear of a Canaanite general. The Israelite army was on the march, ready to smash the hated Canaanites. And at their head was their young general Gideon. The flags were unfurled, there was a smile on everyone's faces. This was going to be a pushover. Through the mountain pass they went, winding themselves up for battle. And there ahead of them was a valley. And it was full of Canaanites, totally, completely, utterly full. This is the valley, right? And look, that is pretty empty right now, isn't it? Well, try and imagine that valley full, jam-packed full as a full train in the rush hour when all the other trains have broken down and everyone who usually travels by train is taking a friend home for the evening. That is how full this valley was. If one more Canaanite had wanted to get into that valley, he would have to have stood on another Canaanite's shoulders. You think you've seen full before, don't you? Well, I'm telling you, you have no idea of the concept full unless you were in this valley on that day. You know how when you've had Christmas dinner with double potatoes and 3 slices of Christmas pudding and mince pies and cream and brandy butter, and you finished off your sister's black magic because she doesn't like hard centres, and someone says to you, how do you feel? And you say full. Well, that is empty compared with how full this valley was on that day. And every Canaanite had a spear and a dagger and a javelin and a bow and loads of arrows and one of those things with about 1,000 blades and a corkscrew and a toothpick. And one way or another, anyone stupid enough to try and pick a fight with that little lot would have lasted about a quarter of a microsecond. Oh dear, said Gideon. Oh dear, said his servant Purah. Oh dear, said the whole Israelite army, and the Canaanites looked up and smiled and rubbed their hands as the sound echoed across the valley. Then Gideon addressed his men. Men, he said, fellow Israelites, you have nothing to fear. The God of the Israelites is on our side. Hooray! Went his men. Even though each of you will have to kill about 200 Canaanites, and most of you have never ever picked up a sword before in your lives, victory is ours! Hooray! Went his men. And if any of you are so chicken that you don't want to share in this famous victory, you can go right now and no one will try and stop you. Hooray! Went his men. And off they scarpered through the mountain pass and back towards their homes again. They left their swords and their shields and their sandwiches and their pots of pickled olives, anything to get away. The infantry ran away, the artillery, the catering corps. And where the band had been, there was just this little pile of trombones and xylophones. Purah looked round. There were about 600 men left. Nice speech, sir, he said to Gideon. Well done. Well, thanks, said Gideon. I'm not altogether sure it was such a bad thing. 1,000 nitwits against that little lot wouldn't have done much good, would it? No, you're probably right, sir, said Purah. I'd try and get rid of a few more if I were you. Good idea, said Gideon. I think I will. Right, men, follow me! And off he marched. No, sir, said Purah, please. That was just one of my little jokes, please. It was just one of Purah's little jokes. Gideon started to pick up speed, and his men started to pick up speed too. Now he was marching really fast. Now he was starting to jog. 600 men and Gideon all jogging down the hillside. Now he broke into a run. They were really sprinting now. Suddenly he held out his hand, and everyone came to a halt, gasping for breath. Right, said Gideon. Tea break, lads. You can have a drink from that pool of water. Great, said Purah. I'm dying of thirst. Shh, 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 shh. There's a Canaanite outpost just round that corner. Oh, fantastic, sir. Wonderful place to stop. The Israelites were as thirsty as dehydrated goldfish. Half of them raced down to the pool, flung themselves on the ground and slurped up the water like noisy puppies. But the rest tiptoed down with their knees knocking, going shh, shh, shh all the time. Then they scooped up the water and took little tadpole-sized sips, all the time on the lookout for Canaanites. Right, said Gideon. I know the ones I'll choose. Yeah, said Purah, the brave ones. Nice thinking. No way, laughed Gideon. You'd have to be stark staring bonkers to be brave in a situation like this. I'll take the sensible ones. I don't think you're taking this business seriously enough, sir. It was night time, and Pura was not a happy servant. There's 300 of us, right? And that valley is full of Canaanites, and I do mean full. That valley is so full. Yes, I know how full it is, interrupted Gideon. It'll be a famous victory. The whole of Canaan will tremble before the power of the God of the Israelites. So what exactly are we going to do, sir? Insisted Pura. I've no idea, said Gideon. Oh, well, that sounds like quite a good plan, sir, said Pura a bit sarcastically. Listen, there's no problem, said Gideon. Come with me and I'll show you what I mean. And they slipped on their camouflage jackets and they rubbed that black stuff all over their faces and they crept off towards the Canaanites. The valley was vibrating with the sound of the entire Canaanite army snoring. Gideon and Pura wriggled under bodies and over bodies and round bodies until, get off, pack it in! They heard a sound coming from a tent and wriggled over to hear what it was. What's the matter? What's going on? Demanded a second voice. You're too heavy, get off me, said the first voice. I'm not on you, you must be dreaming. Come on, wake up. And they heard the sound of a face being slapped by a wet flannel. Phew, oh. That's better, thank you very much, said voice one. I was having this terrible dream, see. I was dreaming that there was this chugga, chugga, chugga noise up in the sky, and I looked up and there was this massive loaf of bread covered in flashing lights, like a flying saucer, know what I mean? And it dropped out of the sky and it squashed all our tents, and then come rolling over to me, and it was squashing me and... You know what that means, said the second voice. No? Neither do I. Come on, let's look it up in my dream book. And they heard the sound of matches being struck and pages being turned, and then, here we are, loaves of bread, loaf of bread disguised as a rhinoceros, no, that's not it, loaf of bread windsurfing down a high street, no, loaf of bread falling out of the sky and squashing you. This means that you and your entire army are about to be wiped out by an extremely good general and a handful of his men. The book came hurtling out of the tent. What rubbish! What a load of codswallop that is! Our army's not going to be wiped out, is it? We're a great army. Certainly not going to be wiped out by a little noddy up in the mountains and his bunch of Israelites. Come on, let's get back to sleep. We've got a hard day's slaughtering tomorrow. Back at the camp, Gideon was triumphant. You see, he chortled, you see? We're going to flatten them like an enormous mighty white. But how, insisted Pura. What's your great master plan, General? Have you seen the massed ranks of our army? 300 headbangers, a collection of second-hand musical instruments, and a set of discarded pickle pots. It's not exactly a state-of-the-art high-tech killing machine, is it? I'm not so sure, replied Gideon, and a big smile spread all over his face. Wake up the yellow bellies, Pura, and tell them to start washing out the pickle pots. The Canaanites were still snoring when 2 hours later Gideon and his men crept down the hillside. Then they fanned out and tiptoed all the way round the valley, going shh all the time till they'd completely surrounded the dozing army. And each man had a pickle pot in one hand with a blazing torch hidden inside it, and in the other hand he had a musical instrument. But they didn't make a sound. Not a triangle tinkled. Gideon waited until he was sure that everyone was in position. And then, boom, he smashed his pickle pot and he whirled his torch above his head and he blew his trumpet and he yelled like crazy. Then the Israelites nearest him did the same thing, then those further away, until the whole valley rang with shouts and music and smashing pickle pots. The Canaanites woke up and they were terrified. It sounded as though they were being attacked by 1,000,000 murdering maniacs and the band of the Coldstream Guards. They panicked. They totally, utterly panicked. They pushed their way out of their tents with their swords in one hand and their trousers in the other, shoving and jostling like calves in the slaughterhouse. Then, in the flick flickering darkness, they could see more sword-wielding trouser wavers, a whole army of sword-wielding trouser wavers. They thrust their swords into the shadows, stabbing each other and throttling each other, and there were cries of panic and shouts of terror and crashing and banging from all over the valley, and the lights were flickering, and the dreadful music went on and on and on. The Israelites hardly had to do a thing. They just sat there in the darkness, plinking away on their xylophones, bashing their drums, tootling their trumpets, and watched amazed as a vast army stabbed itself to death. At dawn, the few remaining Canaanites surrendered. They were beaten and they knew it. They would never rise again. Then everyone in the valley, Israelites and Canaanites alike, dropped to their knees and begged Gideon to be their king. "You don't need a king," he said. "You're free men. Go back to your villages and your farms and rule yourselves." "Fair enough," said Purah, who'd been poking about among the dead bodies. "But have this as a present from us." And he handed him this huge basket full of gold brooches and bracelets and earrings. "Thank you very much," said Gideon. "I'll build an altar to the God of the Israelites. And while you're at it, knock up a little one to the goddess of the Canaanites," said a Canaanite, "just to be on the safe side." Oh, and don't forget the corn god," said someone else. "He's given us top-quality produce for the past 2,500 years. You don't want to rock the boat." "Yes, and remember the thunder god," said someone else. Gideon frowned. What was he supposed to do? He turned to Purah. "I don't want to upset the God of the Israelites," he said, "just because I'm being nice to a few other gods. You know how jealous he can get." "No worries," said Purah. "We're safe as houses here. You've hammered the Canaanites. This is our country now. What could he possibly do? You knock up a few tiny little altars. Go on." At that very moment, a bunch of extremely heavy-looking seafarers was landing down the road in Philistia. They'd come from the north, and they'd been involved in the mother of all gigantic sea battles with the Egyptians. A battle so big, it made the business with the Canaanites look like a grumpy playtime in the kindergarten. After 2 years of fighting, these sailors had been comprehensively clobbered, and now they were looking for somewhere to live, and they didn't care who stood in their way. They unloaded their ground-to-air spears and their high-speed chariots and the defensive shield systems and a whole host of ultra-modern armaments, and gazed out from Philistia towards the rolling hills of Canaan, a land flowing with milk and positively dripping with honey. Oh, it made their mouths water. Slowly, they began to move inland. The Philistines had arrived.